Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a video based on a hangout that I was on earlier today and just things that I observed. So I was bored and, the weather wasn't good here. So I just jumped on Jose's hangout, actually. He let me on with my alternate account. And so I'm petitioning for my TMOG account to be off of his bad person list. But it was an interesting hangout. We actually had quite a few people, the usual kind of suspects, and then Dearth was on there at the beginning, and then it was all sort of the usual suspects like Ali B. Shout out to Ali B. It was good chatting with him, and Rumpus, George, and myself, and Pete Shea, and all that kind of stuff. But it was good. I mean, it was more of like the images, just to kind of get warmed up. And then Jose had to go, and then he left the stream open. So we were talking afterwards and brainstorming, a few different tests. And one of them came up that I thought was interesting that I've never thought of, and could be doable without just an excessive amount of resources and all that kind of stuff, and is as linear and repeatable and observable as possible. But, it does require having a huge amount of wire, whether it's fishing wire, or rope, or something like that. So it's not foolproof by any means. And that's the major contention about it. And I'll kind of talk about that briefly. But, for me, it was good, that we at least, I got a new thought that I haven't thought of, and did not involve like optics and all this kind of other stuff that makes the test very, very subjective and not unique. And so the thing that I want to talk about, though, from like a spiritual perspective, that again is becoming very, very clear to me now, is first, again, for people who know my channel, everything that I view is from the top down. If God doesn't exist, then obviously my channel is completely in vain. But if God does exist, in particular the God of the Bible, that vantage point from the top down to me has always been the most interesting. And, I would say, just one that I'm sort of naturally drawn to, I would say. And so I believe now it's becoming clear that God is censoring. Obviously, YouTube and all this kind of stuff, this is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy where truth has to be released but then squeezed out. And so to me, there is this like window where people who've received truth, I believe God has given that to us, and that's a gift. But then, for this mark of the beast and other evils to continue to prosper, that would have to be shut out, and we see that literally happening right before our eyes, people policing us, and all that kind of stuff. And literally, policing truth. And so, that's happening. And so, God has to be involved, obviously, on those kind of major releases of truth, and then who specifically receives it, and then when the door is closed. And so that's not surprising. We see that, and I attribute that to God. But I also see that this censorship is also of a technical nature, and I think the thing that I've realized is actually the most sinister is that the censorship's actually happening in the flat earth. And I think that this is becoming obvious. And the only exception that I've seen so far on these hangouts is really Ali B. And, this is not even a personal shot or anything like that, but people, and it's just blatantly obvious. I wouldn't say it if it was just, sometimes like people are just dropping randomly and stuff from hangouts calls, but it's becoming obvious. Literally no one wants a unique solution. They don't even want to discuss it. And then Blue Marble, Big Blue, was telling me that our brainstorming session afterwards was dumber than all the other hangouts. And so this is how, again, backwards the world is. He actually said that. And I mean, I had to, for me personally, like I already sensed the whole discussion to be completely stupid. But for me, that was sort of pretty much the nail, in the coffin. We're not going to get a unique solution. And that's one thing. I obviously don't take him seriously, but it was the fact that when we started having that kind of discussion, flat earthers just go away. Like they don't want to see that. They just want to, hear hoopla, yelling, debate, the sun moving around and like, objects in the distance. They don't want an actual solution. And I realize that it's actually the flat earthers, that the one that are quote on our side are the ones that don't want truth, and I just think that to me is becoming very, very telling, that God has to be behind that. It's like, it's a very, very powerful truth. So he would need people in the quote unquote truth to throttle the truth, and it's just very interesting. Like people like Arwin and other flat earthers are on there. They don't say a word when it comes to tests at all. They're out, they got other things to do, better things to do, I guess. And shout out to Ali B. He is literally the only person that I've ever seen and he's technically inclined. And the cool thing about somebody like Ali is that he actually does it strictly out of like curiosity, like for the quote love of the game. And I think that it's kind of scary, that all these people who have all these other, followers and, hangout after hangout every single day. They even have conferences now and all this kind of stuff. There's like not even a chirp of that, and so to me, this level of confusion, obfuscation, it's very, very coordinated. And it's becoming clear that it's on the flat earth side, and so the ballers are all shills. Like I literally was asking them, like, say one thing against the government and they won't. And so like, it's just a slam dunk that they're obviously never going to be interested in a quote unique solution, because they're in a weak position, because the earth is indeed flat and not moving. And so they're not going to, volunteer, their time, efforts, brainstorming a test that will satisfy both sides. And then, we can actually perform it or pay somebody to do it. So it's not shocking that once Ali came up with that idea, or, we were all thinking of that, this long, fishing wire, everybody's like, no, this is just going to snap. It's not going to work. It's just no, like, hey, how do we like potentially make it work? And so all they wanted to push us towards was all the quote tests and experiments that George has already done, again, using like optics. Which we know now that they don't know what they're talking about, because we've proven that objects disappear bottom up across a flat surface in multiple examples. And so they can't argue that. And I'm actually happy they don't argue that anymore. Actually, I was kind of, it was interesting that they don't really go there, and then that discredits their observations of literally the sun, moving away from us, because that is just a quote object disappearing bottom up, just higher up in the sky and moving away from us over the course of the entire day. And sometimes, it can be muddied, at the bottom due to miraging and all that kind of stuff. And so it's the same phenomena. So like that whole analysis, I mean, I would say Pete handled them well today and showed, that there was miraging. It's inconclusive. And then even Rumpus admitted that image that looked like the bottom of the sun was being quote blocked by Earth. It's inconclusive, because there was clearly miraging happening and all that kind of stuff. And so it's even they're sort of conceding that that's not a good test bed for a unique solution. And so now where else do we go? Where else do we what area can we explore to potentially come up with something that will quote settle this debate? And I'm realizing more and more the sinister people, let's say there are quote unquote actors in the flat earth, which I believe there are many, if not most of them, they are actually the worst people, because they don't actually want to solve this thing, and it's just anybody that starts talking about this brings this kind of vibe that me and Ali bring to these. No, like just people start disappearing, it's like the list of all the people listening in was like 20 some people, and then people just start like going away. And I find it interesting that it's the flat earthers, that go away. And it was crazy to think that George and potentially even Lewis Hackett, they were like slightly more inclined to like actually think of a test, and they're ball earthers, and I was just like, obviously I don't agree with George and the stuff that he's done with people calling people's licensing and stuff. But this to me, again, all I can do now, since no one wants to do actual scientific tests, I do like psychological tests, and I go out and like test people and just ask questions and go in and kind of see what's going on. And this is all I can conclude, is that the censorship is happening of a technical, unique solution to the flat earth debate. It's happening from the flat earthers. And so that to me is actually the most sinister And like, to me, the similar analogy would be the Tower of Babel, when there's like groups of people that want to, like, they're just bored and they want to know why they're here, and then they find out the extent of where they are, and then they want to go to God. There'll be a group of genuine truthers, who want to go and explore like where they are, in their surroundings. And then there'll be other people around them that'll be just like, whatever, I don't care. They just go through their life. I think those people who want to build that tower, it's very obvious in this day who those people are, and I think that for all of us, for me, I would put myself in that group. Like, I'd be building that tower. Let's get out of here. Let's figure out where, the extent of this quote unquote prison is that we're living in. But it's very, very clear in this day who those people are. And a lot of it's not even like religious necessarily, it's just purely intellectual curiosity. And I think that's what God's all about. Obviously now it's becoming clear he's the one that's doing the censorship, from quote truth, technical censorship, which I believe is happening right now. I know is happening right now, and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of cool for me to see the people that, are the ones who would be quote unquote building that tower, if they were given the opportunity in this day. And it's not very many people, again, again, the way the Bible says that it is. And so that's very, very telling. Like somebody like Ali, like he was ready to like, brainstorm the test, probably have multiple sessions, and just iron the details out, whether this one or few of them, and, get behind it, and actually do it. And I think that, it doesn't look like it's ever going to happen. I would say pretty much today for me, again, I don't know how bored I'm going to be going forward, but I just it was to me, pretty much it, like, again, I'm glad that Jose let me back on. There was no like hard feelings, or I didn't make fun of him or anything. But I thought it was funny though, by the way, for those people who follow these quote characters, Rumpus started calling Donald Trump a liar. And I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, really? That got me kicked off the panel, like back in the day. So there's a little bit of progress. The ballers are giving us some concessions. I mean, you can't deny reality. Like, everybody knows Donald Trump is an actor and just a complete buffoon. So it was good to see their chief priest, the Rumpus, use that as an example about how the irony was that he was actually saying, like, you can still trust the government, but there are these other people that we sort of know that they're lying, but you can trust the sort of scientific government. I'm like, okay, that's, if you want to do that, clearly he's doing that. But that was just a gas. That was like a soliloquy. It was a poem that he was going, and I actually cut him off from that. I'm like, dude, that's not convincing anybody. You just actually helped our point and motivated us to like look into other things, because our very president is admitted to be just a liar by you and obviously by us. And so like, that doesn't make sense. But to me, it was progress. At least if the ballers are acknowledging the reality slightly, from a political perspective, that helps, for sure, for us to know that there's some human, that we're interacting with. But, I thought it was cool, for me, just to kind of close that door, because it's not going to happen. And I realize it's not going to happen because of the flat earthers. And so if that's the case, then, I mean, all quote God would be satisfying is the appetite of like me and Ali B and like a few others who would maybe digest the results and care about it. But it doesn't look like the flat earthers want it. So they just want to talk about gas pressure without a container, objects, bottom up, and all these optical things, and that kind of thing. They just want to keep, I guess, talk about that over and over every single day. I can't imagine how long that will go on, but again, this world, everything about it, even what I've seen in corporations, people literally are going to their job every day and they're just talking in circles, and like if we watch the news, the financial news, they just talk in circles. They don't talk about the real thing. It's happening in corporations, happening in the church. They're just talking in circles. And so it's no different that vibe, that quote spirit, will be here as well. And so it's what it is. I can't change it. I've realized for me, at best, what I can do is go in and sort of just get a feel for like, what people are into and make conclusions from that, like from a human perspective. But I feel like I've figured all that out. I don't expect any kind of step change going forward. And so I would say for me personally, it was good to jump back on that hangout. And I realized that the real issue now is the flat earthers, for sure. But credit to Ali though, what was cool about this test that he suggested was basically having like two boats and connect them, with like something very, very strong, like very, very strong fishing wire. And it would have to be like it would have to be a long fishing wire or pieces of fishing wire all tied together. So imagine you have just a really, really, like imagine in a kind of spindle, you have like a really, really long wire. And so let's say you have two pretty strong boats sailing in opposite directions, both connected to this really, really long wire. And then I actually thought the ideal thing to start it is if you have like a peninsula where a person can physically walk out, that's the quote starting point. And then let's say I'm on like a thin piece of land, but there's water on both sides that extends far. That's the quote starting point. And then so let's say you have a really, really long, like I said, wire. They're both connected securely to the back of the boats, and then they just both sail away, at roughly the same speed. And so the reason the speed is important because we're actually going to snap this wire, and we want the wire to snap. And so we don't want one to like pull it too fast. And so it doesn't have to be exactly the same speed because again, there's a huge amount of, leeway because there's a lot of, wire, but, roughly the same because we want it to snap in approximately that peninsula. And so like these two boats sail away, and then on a flat earth, it would just sail away, and then that wire will just, go like that. And then eventually it'll snap, and then it'll snap at approximately the same, elevation above, the ground. But on a curved earth, if you have, the boats sailing away like that, that wire will eventually drop. It has to, it has to come closer to the earth, and then it will snap. And its drop will be indicative of the fact that the orientation of these boats is changing. Quote down, and so that, that's pretty clean, it's pretty elegant, it's pretty repeatable. The only issue is then finding a wire that is long enough to have these boats go an appreciable distance that, the thing should drop at some point, if the earth was a ball. And so the ballers would just say you didn't go far enough. That would be their quote wiggle room, their way out of this test, if that were the case. And so it'd have to be pretty long, and both people would have to agree on it beforehand, because the cool thing about this kind of a test is first you know exactly when it will snap, because like how long the wire is, and then it's the length of the wire and then a little bit more. That's when the actual wire would give and snap. And so you could predict how far these boats would have to travel, and then so a lot of things can be sort of known beforehand. And then if you could also calculate, if the earth is curved, how far these boats have to travel before you would see the wire drop towards the ground, to sort of start wrapping around the ball. But so that's good, and I would say it's linear. It's not like optics or anything strange. It's very physical. It's very repeatable. If you have multiple spools of this wire, you can do the test over and over again, and in different parts of the world and stuff like that, and show that the boat's orientation is not changing. Like if both boats go really, really far away, and then the wire remains right prior to it, if we like literally record along that peninsula, and if we can actually capture the point that it's snapping, that if it's snapping and it's still elevated above the ground appreciably, then we know that the earth is flat, because those boats have not changed elevation relative to one another at all. And then the wire would remain quote unquote horizontal. And so that was good. I think that's one that would solve it. Another one is just putting some kind of gyro thing on any individual boat, and then just have it sail. Like it would have to sail fairly far distance, and then literally have like a camera recording the gyro. Anything that alters when you move it around. And the cool thing about this is you literally hold this thing and you move it around, and you show, okay, when I move it like that, the thing is changing its orientation. And so you can kind of test it, and like it's very tangible. So you put that on a boat, calibrate it, set it to 0, normalize it, and then have the boat sail. And then in the ball earth, they believe that boats literally are going like that in all directions. And so you just literally record it. And, obviously there's going to be waves and stuff, but you would just record it the whole time. And then they believe that as a boat sails, like there's a tilt. And so we would see that the boat purely going over curved water causing that tilt. And then over time, like obviously there would be like it would be wavy, but then eventually it would be wavy and then keeping its orientation, honoring its quote new orientation over, a long enough distance. And so the only risk with that is that you have to go far enough to have, the sensitivity of this gyro thing, honor the new orientation. But that's rigorous, and there's no way to argue that, especially if a person does actually do that and then they see that it is actually moving and staying, in its new orientation, and it's increasing as a person goes. Obviously, for anybody with common sense knows that would never happen. That's insane to think that a boat like goes and then like tilts forward anywhere, but that would work. And so those are like reasonable, tests. And so now, again, even with like Bob Nodell and Globebusters and all that, we know that these people are just actors and like they don't love truth because they're using their quote test to support like earth movement and stuff like that, which is like the strongest argument that we have as flat earthers, that we know that these buildings aren't moving. He actually designed something that actually supports something moving, and then having to like have that be another discussion point for another couple months and all that kind of stuff. So even longer than that, people are still citing that, and it's a flat earther. And so like if he has $25,000, but he doesn't want to spend it on something that can actually create a unique solution that no one would argue, what a normal person would do is engage both sides and then, go and conduct a test and make sure that it's rigorous, and it can't be argued once it's done. And like, these couple boat kind of things. And so like, that's where we're at. It looks like it's just noise, just people wanting to talk in circles. And then I've realized that the main issue is that it's the flat earthers. And so to me, I just sort of, lift my hands up. Like it's cool. Like you just go in there. It's basically entertainment. Pretty much everything I would say for me at this point has to be either very, very serious, the times that maybe I'm live streaming with the Bible and stuff like that, or it's just a complete joke. Like it's just to laugh, I guess, like, and just realize that stupidity is dominating and censorship is winning, and then ultimately I want people to know that God is behind this. And so we would have to believe that he wouldn't want this forever. This to me is another confirmation that we're in the end times, because how can a God want the entire world to be stupid? That in just my mind, that does not make sense, that any God really, and definitely not the God of the Bible, would want that to be the quote vibe on earth for a long time. It's like, it's one thing if like a group he's judging, and like limiting what they know, but when the entire world, we're all required to be dumb and talk in circles and not have any concrete any answers to anything. I'm talking about financial, religious, technical, all this kind of stuff. Like nothing's conclusive. No one knows what's going on and all that kind of stuff. Like I guess just continue to be ignorant of everything. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, that would only be for a very specific time. And that would, again, the main issue is that's the entire world, and I've done video recently where I made the statement where like we're required to sin to stay alive. And this is one aspect of that. We're not allowed to know our surroundings, and our reality. And to me, there's no way that God could judge us based on the things that we do when we don't even know where we are, and like what our surroundings are, who our quote unquote family is. We don't know any of these things. Like we're just literally all like we barely know certain things, and stuff like that. Again, I believe these truths are a gift from God, but I just want people to know that these other things that are also very, very important to know, like where we are and the extent of our surroundings and all that kind of stuff that certain people on earth do know. God's aware of those things that he's limiting, that we're not allowed to quote go there. But to me, again, that can't happen for very long. And it's just so rampant across the entire earth. It has to be for a very, very specific purpose and a very unique time period in human history where, again, it's very, very obvious to us, that we're being held back from all types of information. And so that has to be for the end times. And it looks like the biggest asset to that withholding of information is actually from quote unquote truthers. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.